Senate will come to order. Color Guard, parade the colors. Will you please join in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With us today is Lieutenant Colonel Gary T. Fisher. He will be delivering the invocation. He is the 10th Mountain Division Chaplain of the Fundamental Baptist Fellowship International in Fort Drum, New York. Colonel Fisher.
I invite you to pray with me. Our precious Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, for the life that you've given us, the riches of your blessings, the freedoms we enjoy, and your gracious and tender mercies. In this chamber, we pause to offer your gratitude for the gift of this great nation and for the great state of New York. Forgive us for our transgressions against you, and help those gathered here today to work together in the knowledge of your truth. I thank you for these leaders who are here by your authority. Please bless them and their families. Give them the wisdom, discernment, humility, and guidance that they need in fulfilling the obligations and responsibilities entrusted to them. May they be quick to hear and slow to speak, slow to anger. May their weakness be the vessel of your strength. May the work that is accomplished promote your righteousness and peace throughout the great state of New York. So shall we make our nation great in goodness and good in its greatness. Our solemn prayer is that you will guide us by your word, that you will comfort us by your presence, that you will strengthen us by your power. It is in your holy name we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the high honor and great privilege to introduce to you Major General Walter Pyatt, the commander of the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum, New York. General?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As we say in the 10th Mountain Division, climb to glory, which fits perfectly with this state motto, Excelsior, ever upward. So since we're both moving up, it makes perfect sense to me that the 10th Mountain is your division. I'm honored to be here with you today, the 6th 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum Day. Back at Fort Drum, we affectionately call this day Albany Day, and only few of us get to make the cut. I put my name on top of the list. But I think it speaks to our shared understanding of how important our relationship is and the need to move ever upward. Governor Cuomo, Lieutenant Governor Hochul, Senate and Assembly leadership, especially to Senator Patty Richie, it was with sincere gratitude that we once again accepted your invitation to be here today. And yet, it is you all who have spent today ensuring we feel your thanks. Senator Richie is a champion for us. She makes every soldier feel like part of the community. Twice in my son's time in high school up in Carthage, New York, she sent him a special note of a photo she saw of him in the local newspaper saying, "I saw something special about you." Those photos are framed and forever on his wall wherever our military home is. She makes you feel like you're part of that community and not just a military kid on another new assignment. I call her my senator, and ma'am, I want to say thank you again. Most of us here, there are a lot of us here that are from New York. Some of the soldiers sitting right over here to my left, 31st Infantry Polar Bears, are from New York, and Staff Sergeant Flynn, his parents are here today to witness and see what he brings to the Army every single day. Years ago, when I was here as a deputy commander, we responded to a hurricane named Sandy. It was hard to figure out what an active duty division could provide. We were eager, but yet we were waiting for federal authorization to support. Soldiers rushed to the motor pool and readied their fuelers. They said, "Sir, this is our home. If you can send us to Iraq and to Afghanistan, you can send us to New York City to help our families." Although it's an entirely unique honor for me to be sharing our stories and displays with you all here today, historically, it does make perfect sense. This beautiful building was finished by these lawmakers, you lawmakers, in 1899. But just 9 years later, it was some of those very first occupants that were discussing and approving the creation of Pine Camp, which is now Fort Drum. Our Army saw the incredible training value in the foothills of the Adirondacks, and the first legislatures to walk these halls understood that their state's value in supporting our nation's defense. The synergy of this relationship, with its roots here more than a century ago, has ensured that Fort Drum is where our nation looks when she needs to hone the skills of its warfighters. From World War I to the global war on terror, and now as we look to an ever-evolving future fight. There is no doubt we are again standing together during a critical time, depending upon the training opportunities afforded to us at Fort Drum, made possible through the work and cooperation of those who came before us. Over the past 15 months, the 10th Mountain Division patch has been visible around the globe, supporting operations and missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, North Africa, Germany, Poland, Latvia, Greece, and Korea. Today, our Combat Aviation Brigade is a few months into a 9-month deployment to Eastern Europe. I spoke with the commander Saturday, and his forces are deployed from Estonia to Greece, building partner capacity throughout the NATO alliance. Members of our 10th Sustainment Brigade are preparing for a deployment to Kuwait. Your pride in your soldiers is not misplaced. They demonstrate resolve and commitment to international partners around the world with expertise and professionalism, and are light, fast, and lethal when our enemies make the mistake of threatening our nation's security. It's a North Country saying, to make hay while the sun shines. And if you're at Fort Drum now, you're getting ready to make hay. Training is ramping up, and we're bringing together active duty, Army Reserve, National Guard units from around the country, as well as other services for world-class training events. Our North Country neighbors living around the installation will tell you, it's busy, it's loud, rattling, and a rumbling season. But we may not be the quietest of neighbors, but rest assured we are among the most grateful. Without the continued grace and understanding of our surrounding communities, we would not be able to keep our units in line with the Army's training guidelines to ensure the highest level of readiness for our soldiers. And because a little space goes a long way when you're a loud neighbor like we are, perhaps one of the most important enablers to sustaining training readiness is the Army Compatible Use Buffer Program, which was bolstered by more than $4.5 million from New York State. Together, we are committed to ensuring encroachment does not diminish any of the post-training potential. Our sustainability empowers more than training. Fort Drum is a power projection platform, which is just our way of saying we have the ability to send our soldiers anywhere in the world in a very short amount of time. We're the only defense asset with the ability to do this in the entire Northeast of the United States. And again, New York State is empowering that capability with a $22 million investment to infrastructure that will improve access between the main post of Fort Drum and our airfield. In this time of continuing resolutions and diminishing resources, this kind of support resonates across the Army. And as the Army has had to look for places to cut, we've been able to stand together and say, you can't afford to do so here. Since the last round of cuts, Fort Drum and the 10th Mountain Division has led the total Army effort with regional partnerships and increased combat readiness and capability across all military components. The Northeast Regional Partnership Program aligns brigades of the division and similar units and formations across and within the Army and the Army National Guard, allowing for an open exchange of ideas, exchange of best practices and resources to increase readiness and capability. And appropriately, a key partner in our program is the New York's 42nd Infantry Division. Thanks to the efforts of so many of you here today, the 42nd Infantry Division actively supports our main command post operational detachment. Stationed out of Syracuse, these soldiers augment critical areas such as intelligence, operations, and civil and public affairs, allowing the 10th Mountain Division to maintain essential capabilities during our many deployments. The benefits to our relationship are mutual. In 2016, the Fort Drum Fire Department answered 104 mutual aid calls in Jefferson County. Many of our soldiers and civilian employees are volunteer members of neighboring fire departments. Law enforcement agencies throughout New York rely on our explosive ordnance disposal teams to investigate and remove any found ordnance. Many of you tried to pick up a small plastic bottle today. Imagine trying to pick up ordnance without these trained professionals. They support local schools and science and job fairs around the North Country community. Fort Drum relies on the North Country medical community to provide comprehensive managed health care. We simply could not care for our soldiers and families without them. This unique model focuses on maintaining and improving and restoring health to more than 40,000 soldiers, family members, and retirees. This unique relationship is a proven model for efficiency within the Army and empowers the recruitment and retention of specialty care. As with health care, when Fort Drum became the home of the 10th Mountain Division in the 80s, the decision was made to send our military children to schools off post. And the reputation of that New York State has for educating its youth makes Fort Drum an appealing location for many of our families. I'm one of them. This is my third time coming to Fort Drum, and much of that has to do with how much my family loves it here. My children still have friends in the area, and I fondly remember my daughter's first day of school. The day before she started school, her teacher came from off-post school of Evans Mills, came to our quarters to introduce herself to our very nervous and scared young girl. Later on, my son was the quarterback for Carthage, who really took it to Indian River, but fell short the year Indian River won states. But we're part of that community, and we're part of that community because the community embraces us. My daughter just graduated college, but still today, these school districts, teachers and staffs, close partnership with our military families is critical, especially during times of deployments. In turn, the millions of dollars of federal impact aid that is funneled into the North Country School is used for all who attend. Military programs like Soldier for Life, transition assistance, in addition to working with federal agencies like Department of Labor and Veterans Affairs, are also in constant contact with statewide employers, local and regional economic development agencies, trade schools, and State University of New York system to promote opportunities for soldiers and family members transitioning from active duty service so that they decide to stay, work, raise their families, and pay their taxes in New York. Recent legislation has made it easier for families moving to Fort Drum from out of state to obtain employment in fields that require certification and licenses, reducing the paperwork, and recognizing out-of-state certifications empowers financial security and those military families living and working here, and also provides a qualified workforce for many hard-to-fill vocations. Our natural resource managers are good stewards of installation property to ensure the military can and operate on these lands safely and with regulatory guidelines. Good stewardship not only benefits military trainers, but also the stakeholders and natural resources. Our environmental team maintains wetlands, tracks wildlife and their habitats, empowers sustainable hunting, cares for archaeological sites and cemeteries, and so much more. We do so in order to ensure that we will be afforded the pristine training opportunities available here, first discovered more than 100 years ago. But also, we recognize the incredible wild beauty of Fort Drum and its importance to the area's ecosystem, and we feel very protective of it. To me, Fort Drum is a nature preserve where wildlife thrives, past culture is preserved, recreation is abundant, and military training is at its very best. I am less than 1 week in this job and getting to lead this mighty Climb to Glory team. Just last Thursday, I took command from Major General Jeffrey Bannister, one of our best combat-tested warriors in the United States Army. During the handoff, we didn't talk tactics, we didn't talk deployments. We talked how important the North Country community is to the 10th Mountain Division, and how important it is to live and train in northern New York, where we can meet the demands the Army place on us. It's an important part of our change of command, but because this unique and historic relationship is the cornerstone of our soldiers' success. And our soldiers' success is our nation's security. Thank you for honoring the Fort Drum and 10th Mountain Division here today. But more importantly, thank you for what you do for the 10th Mountain Division and our families, civilians, and North Country communities every day. We truly are your New York Division. Climb to glory.
Reading of the Journal.
In Senate Monday, May 1st, the Senate met pursuant to adjournment. The Journal of Sunday, April 30th is read and approved. On motion, Senate adjourned.
Without objection, the Journal stands approved as read. Presentations of petitions, messages from the Assembly, messages from the Governor, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, communications and reports from state officers, motions and resolutions. Senator DeFrancisco?
Yes. Can we move to the adoption of the resolution calendar with the exception of Resolution 1854, please?
All in favor of adopting the resolution calendar with the exception of resolution number 1854, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Resolution calendar is adopted.
Can you now take up... Excuse me? You take up previously adopted Resolution 761 by Senator Richie, read it in its entirety, and call on Senator Richie to speak.
The Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution number 761 by Senator Richie, memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim May 2nd, 2017 as 10th Mountain Division and Fort Drum Day in the state of New York. Whereas, Fort Drum is located in Jefferson County in northern New York and is the largest military installation in the northeastern United States. And whereas Fort Drum is named for Lieutenant General Hugh Drum, a decorated national hero, former commander of 1st Army, and an early leader of the state's own volunteer militia, the New York Guard. And whereas for more than 30 years, Fort Drum has been home to the United States Army's storied 10th Mountain Division, one of the most deployed units in the U.S. Army. And whereas the 10th Mountain Division served with honor, distinction, and great sacrifice as part of Operation Enduring Freedom and other actions central to our nation's response to the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. And whereas elements of the 10th Mountain Division, based at Fort Drum in New York State, were the first to be deployed in the aftermath of those attacks and the last units to return from combat duty. And whereas in addition to Operation Enduring Freedom, the 10th Mountain Division deployments have included Hurricane Andrew relief in Florida, Operation Restore Hope in Somalia, Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti, Task Force Eagle in Kosovo, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And whereas more than 300 brave men and women who were members of the 10th Mountain Division and based at Fort Drum have given their lives in the cause of defeating global terrorism. And whereas the distinguished service of units posted to Fort Drum have been celebrated by presidents, members of Congress, and members of the international community. And whereas in addition to its vital role in our nation's defense, Fort Drum is the largest employer in northern New York and an economic engine for the state and region with a direct impact of more than $1 billion. And whereas the 19,000 soldiers and officers of Fort Drum and their families are an integral part of the community and are welcomed as neighbors, co-workers, classmates, friends, and fellow New Yorkers. And whereas it is the sense of this legislative body to salute the soldiers and officers of the 10th Mountain Division, to honor their dedication to preserving our freedom and our nation, and to recognize their individual and collective contributions to our communities and to New York State. And whereas for the past 6 years, the 10th Mountain Division and Fort Drum Day has served to educate members of this legislative body about the sacrifices made by the brave men and women of our armed forces, as well as the importance of the installation of our nation's defense and New York's economy. And whereas Fort Drum has and will continue to play an important and essential role in ensuring our nation's military readiness to defend our state and nation against hostility and threats to our safety and national security. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the legislative body pauses deliberations to memorialize Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim May 2nd, 2017 as 10th Mountain Division and Fort Drum Day in the state of New York, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution suitably engrossed be transmitted to Major General Walter E. Pyatt, Commanding General, 10th Mountain Division and Fort Drum.
Senator Richie.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to once again host Fort Drum Day in the New York State Senate. For 6 years, Fort Drum Day has given us the opportunity to meet some of the soldiers and officers who are on the front lines in defense of our freedom, to learn about them and their important work, to express our appreciation for their service and sacrifice, and to learn about the importance of Fort Drum both to our nation and to the state of New York. Fort Drum is New York State's largest single-site employer and a centerpiece of the economy of the region that I represent. Today, we are joined in the chamber by some of the members of the 10th Mountain Division who are native New Yorkers. Across many battles in every war and on every continent, New York has been well represented in the service of our nation, and we can all take great pride that this tradition continues. I would like to take a moment to introduce our New Yorkers. Captain Ryan Marquette from Rome, Staff Sergeant John Flynn from Schenectady, Sergeant David Spear, Hilton, Specialist Holden Schoenig from Bellport, Specialist James Cox from Buffalo, Private First Class Alan Harris from Watertown, Private First Class Michael Bathrick from Poughkeepsie, Private First Class Reginald Castillo from Queens. Amid the ceremony, the medals, the flags, and the displays today, and when we go out of our way to say to a soldier in uniform, thank you for your service, it's important to never forget what these men and women are all about. Major General Walter Pyatt, Fort Drum's newest commanding general, put it well last week during the change of command ceremony on post. When our nation faces a crisis, it turns to the Army, and the Army turns to the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum. 23 times this division has deployed since September 11th. Right now, 10th Mountain troops are on the front lines in Afghanistan and Korea. They've led the fight, and they've helped keep peace in troubled spots around the world, from Somalia to Panama, from Bosnia to Haiti. And closer to home, they've worked to protect and rebuild communities in the wake of Katrina, Andrew, and Sandy. General Pyatt himself has served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, among other postings. One of his predecessors, General Stephen Townsend, who you met on a previous Fort Drum Day, is now leading the fight against ISIS. Another, General Mark Milley, is now the Army's Chief of Staff, the highest-ranking uniformed officer. Every morning when I turn on the TV, I hear about another crisis in another corner of the world. I say a quiet thank you for the men and women who serve at Fort Drum, and I say a quiet prayer for their safety. Because when the 10th Mountain Division deploys, these courageous men and women fight to win. My colleagues, what you see here today and throughout the day in the concourse is what winning looks like. So let me just thank the soldiers of Fort Drum for allowing us to learn and celebrate. Thank you, General Pyatt, for your leadership and sacrifice. Thank you, Chaplain Fisher, for your inspiration and your service. And thank you to all the soldiers and the officers of the 10th Mountain Division, and to the members of your family for the honor and privilege of representing you here in the New York State Senate. Let us also take a moment to recognize General Ray Shields, who is the commander of the New York Army National Guard. Thank you to the members of the community organizations who are here to support the 10th Mountain Division, along with my good friend, Senator Jim Wright, who traveled here from Watertown and also has always been a great supporter of Fort Drum. Finally, Leader, I would like to thank you and all of my colleagues for your support of our soldiers and for the 10th Mountain Division and for Fort Drum. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to add my voice to that of Senator Richie, and to all the folks who are here from Fort Drum. You know this, and we're going to repeat it so the public knows it as well. You don't have a better advocate. She is passionate and unrelenting on your behalf, all in good ways. And I think back to a couple of years ago, based on what Senator Richie had done to educate us and enlighten us as to the value of Fort Drum, not only in her region, but to the state and the country. There was a time where the Army was looking to downsize and make cuts. And it took about a New York minute for Patty to enlist the support of everybody in this chamber advocating to make sure that that didn't happen. And fortunately, it didn't. In listening to our colleagues, Senator Hannan remarked to me that all of these young men and women look like they're in spectacular shape. And I hasten to add that every one of them can button all 12 buttons on their jacket, so we know they're in good shape. I asked Senator Richie, what is the appropriate title? Is it Major General? Is it General? So Major General, General, Commander, I'm just going to say Sir, and welcome you, and I'll close on this point. It's very simple. Thank you for who you are, what you do on our behalf. And you made reference to this being your 3rd tour and coming home. To me, as a New Yorker, that feels pretty darn good, knowing that you would consider New York to be your home, and then you spoke glowingly of your own family, particularly your children. I feel like, based on the years that you all have been coming here, when I came to visit, I was accorded in deference and respect along with my colleagues that I'm not sure I deserve, but by golly, it felt very good anyway. I felt like I was family when I had the privilege of meeting with you. Godspeed to all of you, and thank you for everything you do.